All right. What up, everybody? I have something very special for you. One of my favorite clients I've ever had ever, and just one of my favorite people I've ever met doing this work. Can you do me a favor and say your last name for me? I've never actually heard it pronounced.
Kavuchi, Alexandra
Okay, cool.
Kavuchi.
That's what I would have thought.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you're amazing, and I wanted to
Thank
introduce
you.
everybody to you for multiple reasons. The first reason is because you are the person I've seen take the shadow integration framework as I've taught it and repeat it and teach it better than anyone else I've ever seen.
Thank
And
you.
so that's really fucking cool. So I just wanted
It's
to
incredible.
acknowledge you for that, and let everybody know that if you want a different perspective on this shit, follow her, hire her. She knows exactly what she's talking about. She's really good at it, and you're going to get it from different and unique perspectives. So I just wanted to
Cool.
thank
Thank
you
you.
for that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I figured we could talk a little bit about, your experience learning shadow integration, and then ultimately the thing I really want to get to is this talk about polarity,
Yeah.
because whenever I go into it, I do my best to use non-gendered language because it is something that transcends gender expression and all that sort of stuff. And so I try to be careful with my language so it can be accessible. However, because I'm me and I'm a straight dude, a lot of the stuff I say just kind of falls flat to certain ears. And I
Yeah.
can understand why. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to give those people that either can't or don't want to hear it from me an opportunity to hear it from you.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm stoked.
Cool. So, is there anything about the shadow integration process that you want to talk about? Because I loved teaching it to you. I love seeing what you've done. You're writing about it. I love the way you write about it, and it's just so cool to see. So I guess just tell me about what the process of learning it was like, what it's done for you, and all that sort of stuff, and what it's been like teaching it as well.
Yeah. Honestly, when I found you, I was at a really pivotal place where like a lot of things in my life were falling apart. And I felt like I knew that there was something missing from everything that I'd learned in the coaching industry and
Mm,
everything that I was understanding. And I kind of knew that there were compartments of myself that were not being accessed, but I didn't know how to or what that meant or what that looked like. And I remember actually watching a live of yours on rage, on anger
mm,
and rage. And I was like, I'm a fucking angry bitch. And like, I have never felt safe to bring that to anybody because I have an intensity to me that, for the most part, I hadn't encountered in the coaching community over the years, especially in the
sure.
spiritual communities. It's like, ooh. Um,
Yeah.
and, I have a lot more pessimistic parts of me, a lot more anger, a lot more rage at the time. And I found your work and I was like, done. Like, I got on a call with you. I was like, fuck, I think things are going to change. Um, one, it's so hard to even talk about what it did, but I think it really opened up so many different compartments for me of
Mm,
the way that it gave me a relationship to myself instead of just kind of operating inside of some context that I had learned that I am. It
mm,
gave me this ability to actively relate to myself and to be in an evolution with myself in a way that I had never experienced before because I'd always been trying to like slap things on, whether that was
mm,
like
mhm.
affirmations or like things that I do, but I'd never actually learned to relate to myself, period. I'd never actually learned to relate to myself and then have better relationships. And all of that was really just reserved for other people. I didn't even know it could be kind of transformed into the way that I exist with myself. And so it opened up like a whole family and it made me realize, honestly, I think it made me come back alive in a lot of ways. I
Wow.
think it was like the start of making me come back alive in a lot of ways. Um, and yeah, and I remember painstakingly, like your patience over that year that we worked together. Jesus Christ. I
It was
remember
easier than you
boxing
think.
you. Okay, good. I remember boxing you, like asking you over and over and over and over because it really felt like I was being introduced to myself for the first time ever in a completely new context. And yeah, I've never looked back. I relate to myself in these ways now, and I my relationships get better and better and better.
I love it. And by the
Yeah,
way, I loved getting all of your messages because they were so
yeah,
insightful and you clearly wanted to move forward and you were really chewing on
yeah,
shit. So they were good questions. So when I
Yeah, yeah,
got him,
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
all right, cool. This is like going to give me something to dig my teeth into. This is good shit.
I know. I feel that now with my clients. I'm like, oh yeah, I love it when you're like, make it
Yeah.
complicated, like make it complicated, you know?
That's so good. So, and I'm kind of curious now because it's been a long time since we worked together. Like, how's
Yeah.
that relationship with anger now?
Honestly, great. I like my anger has turned into fire instead of
Nice.
like this like up and out like
Hmm.
destructive thing. I love my anger. I am it's like my oh, I love my anger. I love her so much. She's my protector. I understand her. It no longer
Amazing.
feels out of control or something to be ashamed of. It's just like I got her. She's got me, you
Amazing.
know?
And I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
like
yeah.
the ease and like relaxation and comfort that you said that when. And it's just like,
Yeah,
because we're
yeah,
talking about something as volatile as rage. And then
yeah,
for you to be able to be like, yeah, we got each other. We're good.
yeah, yeah. I trust her. She trusts me.
That's
Yeah,
fucking incredible. Because it wasn't
yeah.
that way, like not that long ago.
No, no. And I think I really held a lot of shame around it and around how big I felt like I could get, and how explosive I felt like I could get. And to be honest, I had been previously really explosive before I started working with you to people around me in my
Mm-hmm.
younger years. But by that time, it was all just like internalizing and like
Mm,
it was just in there and I was keeping it down and in, but I felt out of control. I was kind of
mm,
losing my shit internally all the time. And the shame around that, I think you really, really helped carve this path of me seeing the value in my own expression when
mm.
I historically felt like just that was too much and that was too much and this is too
Sure.
much. And so it's like there's like it's like a burning campfire instead of like a fucking like gasoline fire. You know what I mean? It's like just like perfect. It's like the perfect amount.
I love that. That's amazing. That's so beautiful to
Yeah.
hear. And so that's a perfect segue because, like, the other things that we talked about in this work, because you were going through something very specific when you reached out. And I don't want to speak too much about that for you. I want to let you talk about that.
Yeah.
But that's where the kind of polarity conversation that we had came in, is kind of the interpersonal things you were dealing with. And so the degree that you're comfortable with, I'd love to hear about like what was going on and how ultimately the polarization or the polarity conversation came in, and then we can go into
Yeah.
it a little bit more later.
Awesome. Yeah. So I remember bringing the polarity conversation to you because, I remember when I was like 20 or 21, I told my best friend that I didn't know what I was saying to her, but I said to her, do you ever see a movie and you feel like a romantic comedy or something, and you feel like you're both the guy and the girl?
Mm,
And I know that that's very gendered and whatever, but we'll get there. I couldn't understand why I felt such a deep connection to the man in the movie and why I felt such a deep connection to the woman in the movie, and
mm,
not necessarily just from like a I want that one, or right. It was a I'm identifying with them.
mm-hmm.
So I'd been holding this for years and years. And I'd always asked my straight friends who like probably had no fucking idea what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And what? But I'd always felt a sense of like, I feel equally like each person in the movie, how they're being represented to me, how they're
Mm-hmm.
being communicated to me. I feel like that's in me somewhere, right? I
Mm-hmm.
could really deeply understand it. At the time that I started working with you, I had just gone through a relationship that with a woman who's very, very much in her feminine. And I had historically been in relationships where I was more in my feminine energy
Mm-hmm.
and my partners were more in their masculine energy. Um, it's kind of like that old adage. I know a lot of people hate this, but a lot of people ask it, where in a lesbian relationship, people will be like, who's the man? Right. And it infuriates a lot of people for good reason. I totally understand it. But
Sure.
there's a people ask because people are trying to understand roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
People are trying to understand roles in the world.
Sure.
So I historically took on the role of the more feminine energied person in the relationship. And I had just dated somebody who was very much in her feminine. And I had never actually accessed these
Mm,
parts of me that felt more masculine. And it was kind of like a surge came up and I was like, whoa, I can feel like the shame of my masculine parts. I can feel just like
mm,
shame that I would imagine the men in my life I felt like impotency in ways.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like fucking Danny DeVito at one point because she was really tall and I'm 5'2", you know, I was like, I feel like Danny DeVito. Like, I felt like there was so much that came up for me that I was like, what is happening? I don't understand what's happening. And I don't know why I didn't feel it in these relationships. And I remember bringing it to you and being like, I feel like, I think at the time, the best way I could communicate it to you was like, I feel like an impotent man sometimes, like this like shame and this like, you know, this embarrassment, because I had never connected with those parts. And it was a lot for me to.
Yeah, I remember you using
them.
those words and I was like, wow, that's fucking fascinating. Like I didn't realize that was possible.
Yeah. I didn't either. And so I that really opened up a conversation for me, I think, about understanding my own masculine and feminine parts and energies and how they actually interact with each other and what that actually is like for me internally. But yeah, that's why we brought it up, because I'd been in a relationship or a relational experience with somebody who really kind of called those parts out of me. And I had realized I never knew those parts. I didn't know what to do with those parts. I didn't even know what some of these feelings were. And so I was like, Chris, can you help? Yeah.
And so I'm curious, how did the polarity frame help with that? Like, what were you able to learn from that? What were you able to integrate into your life? Like, what about it was actually helpful?
I think it really helped me recognize, that a lot of the feelings that I have, I think it really helped me. I went down the road of kind of recognizing that my masculine and feminine poles and experiences and energies is different than my sexuality, is different than my gender expression. They can all be related, but they're not the same containers.
Got it.
And I think that can get really confusing. And that
would you mind unpacking that? Yeah,
I mean, I've never really unpacked it before, so we're gonna do it right here, right now.
Cool. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
My masculine and feminine energies and poles feel like expressions of me, right? They feel like certain expressions of me, certain parts of me that have an experience of life. My sexuality feels like what I am drawn to and aroused by, that also includes expression. Right. So like includes these things. And then gender expression feels more like the physical manifestation of like how I want to express, whether that's how I dress, how I present. Right. It's like more the physical manifestation, whereas the energetic experience is more like the felt sense. And sexuality is more like in motion, I guess, with someone else and arousal and all that.
That makes sense. So, I just want to rephrase that to make sure I understand.
Sure.
So it sounds like the gender expression is what you feel you are in your body. And then the sexual element of it is, as being in that body, there are things that excite you, attract you, turn you on, all that sort of stuff. So that's the sexual element of it. Yeah. And then within that, as the person you identify within the body, and as the things that you're attracted to within that, is the polarity frame. Is that accurate?
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Great. That's actually much more simpler than I would have expected.
Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience of it, in understanding it. And it is a confusing conversation, I think, for a lot of people, especially I've had this conversation with my friends in the queer community quite a bit about polarity and masculine and feminine polarity and energies. And I've noticed that the place that has brought the most confusion for each of us individually has been how those things relate to each other: sexuality, gender expression, and masculine, feminine polarity. But I kind of find it's like a triple Venn diagram, right? Yeah. Where it's like it all connects, but they are, and it's nuanced where they're separate, but they are separate, at least for me, separate experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like the way that you described it seems simple enough to where and especially the way that you felt when you were describing it, it seems really congruent in that you're just kind of like at home and comfortable with that. And you see all the different elements of the expression and you're kind of just okay with it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes if I'm not, it's just something to explore. It's like, what's there? What's confusing me? So yeah,
Fuck yeah, I love it. And so, how
yeah.
has this impacted your relationships, like going forward? Because you were in the middle of a separation when we first started talking, and it's been like at least 2 years or something like that. So, I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, how has this impacted your relationships going forward?
It's honestly been really, really cool because I think it's helped me deepen my intimacy, both to my own sexuality and
Nice.
myself, and also bringing that into exploration with my former partner was really fun, to be honest. It was like,
Nice.
oh, we can play in a lot more ways because I can explore what it means to be in my masculine energy in my sexuality, right? I
Mm,
can explore what it means
nice.
to be in my masculine energy in my gender expression if I want. I can explore what it means to be in my femininity in my sexuality. And
Mm.
I can
Oh, that's
explore
cool.
I can explore what it means to be in my dominant femininity in my sexuality, or my dominant masculine in my sexuality, or my submissive masculine or my submissive feminine.
That's
And so
awesome.
it's created kind of a playground. Um, and I've found that the people that I've related to, it's allowed for more intimacy, yeah, and
That's
more
awesome.
a more dynamic experience with them.
Awesome. Is it?
Yeah.
I don't really know anything about dating in the queer community. So is it difficult to find people to date or interact with that are into these kind of dynamics, or is it fairly rare?
I don't. I'm actually not too familiar with dating in the queer community because I've been like historically a long term
Got it.
relationship person, and so I just got out of a really long term relationship. Um, but I've had this conversation with a lot of my friends in the queer community, and every time I bring it up, they're like, "Yes, yes, 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 yes,
No
yes.
shit.
This is what." Yeah, they're like, "This is exactly what I feel," and I don't know how to put words to it. Where there's
Wow.
such a dynamic experience and a fluidity that that I think sometimes for a lot of people can defy anything gendered.
Mhm.
But when we do kind of break it down, and when I've had these conversations with my friends in the queer community, we do often find that there is like a masculine expression energetically and a feminine expression energetically.
Mhm.
And um, a lot of the people in the queer community that I've talked to about this specifically have also sat with this, but unknowingly. Like, yeah, I don't really know where I fit. I don't really know how I feel. Um, because we defied normal societal containers already
Mhm.
at a younger age, most of
Oh
us.
yeah, you basically grew up outside of them.
Right, right. And
Yeah, I
so
hadn't considered
and
that.
yeah, and so there was a lot of like scrounging to try to figure it out. And I think that a lot of the people that I've spoken to have really recognized and or struggled and or been confused by the fact that kind of all of it is in there.
Mhm.
And because we grew up outside of a specific
Yeah.
cultural container, it's nobody really told us what to choose, or nobody really
Mhm.
told us what was okay societally. And so it's been a lot of figuring things out for ourselves.
That makes
And I
sense.
think, yeah, I think that, but everybody I've talked to in the queer community is like, yeah, I've totally had this experience. I totally feel that. I sometimes feel more in my masculine. I sometimes feel more in my feminine, and I feel more flexibility between them.
That's awesome. That's
At
that's
least, yeah, at least are the people I've spoken to. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's so cool to hear because pretty much
Yeah.
every time I talk about it, I get a decent amount of pushback. And
Yep.
specifically, the reason I wanted to have you on was because he deleted the comment. It's not here anymore. But there was this guy who got like mad at me saying that like I
Mm-hmm.
was teaching stuff that's like essentially bad for queer people. And he's like, it's been proven that this doesn't work for queer people. And I'm like, proven by who? Because like my experience doesn't match that. But I can't speak for people. And there's a
Right.
whole level of experience and understanding that I don't have. And so I figured that if anybody would be the best person to, say the things that in a way that other people would be able to hear, because I
Yeah.
know that there's going to be guards up from hearing it from me, and I understand why those guards are up. And to a certain degree, I think they kind of should be because there's a filter
Yeah. Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
think is
Mm-hmm.
important. And so I kind of want to hear it from you. But first, I'm curious about like, have you experienced any pushback from people?
I haven't experienced any pushback from people. I also haven't talked about it on a larger scale, so I
Got it.
may very well experience pushback here.
Yeah, makes sense.
But I haven't experienced pushback on a smaller scale with anybody at all. Honestly,
Hmm.
everybody that I've spoken to about it in the queer community has completely embraced it and completely felt like, oh, like it kind of clicked something with them. So yeah,
Got it. So
Yeah.
now I'm just kind of trying to figure out what is it about it that, because I didn't ask him, he deleted his comment. I couldn't figure out who it was. So I'm not exactly sure why he thought it was harmless or why he thought it was such a big deal. Because I've heard this from multiple people, and I understand. First of all, I'm a straight dude, so I
Yeah.
use gendered language sometimes, so I could see how that would create some red flags and
Yeah.
stuff. Actually, I'm curious, has that ever bothered you if I use gendered language?
No.
Got it. Okay, cool. Are you,
I
are
mean,
you,
it's never bothered me. Yeah, no, it doesn't bother me in general. I think what I've seen very much in my own process personally
Mhm.
is that, and I don't know why he thought it was super harmful either. And I don't know why. I can imagine why people in the queer community would say that that it could be perceived as harmful. I don't necessarily agree that, like, you know, homogenizing that group and saying one thing is harmful to everybody. I don't necessarily agree with that.
Totally.
Because I obviously have a different experience and I'm in the queer community.
Mhm.
Um, but I would guess that, there is, in my personal experience, and this is what I would maybe make an assumption on, whether right or wrong or correct or incorrect. I remember really going through this confusing process of feeling like, because I didn't have a very specific container that I fit in when I was younger and when we were figuring out our sexuality and all of that stuff,
Mhm.
I felt like I didn't fit anywhere. And that, I believe, can have the ability to either create resentment or
Yeah, that makes sense.
protection from um, like a certain kind of expressed group of person, right? Whether that's like men or women or whatever it is. And I think that there is so much that people have had to go through in the queer community in terms of self exploration with no guardrails and
Mm,
no community to help kind of guide and show them, at least an out loud community, very
yeah.
clandestine communities. And so my guess is that it's like a desire to not kind of um, feel that or experience that, and or there may be resentment, and or there may be a misunderstanding about what you're actually saying, to be honest.
Sure. Yeah, because some of the criticism I've gotten is it's mostly people that are kind of conflating polarity with gender expression.
Right.
And then when I say
That's what I would
masculine,
imagine.
feminine,
Yeah, that's
they
what I would imagine.
assume I mean male and female.
Right.
And so, you've laid that out a little bit more, but I'm kind of curious if you can explain just in a little bit more detail how you distinguish the two in case there's somebody who's hearing this who might be like, okay, but they are the same. Like, what do you mean they're different? Like, can
Yeah.
you kind of unpack that a little bit to help somebody who might be in that position understand?
Yeah. So I guess the best way that I could explain it would be that the masculine and feminine energies are very much like a felt sense internal experience. It's very much a personal experience. It's very much happening within, and it is like it's like a form of felt sense expression, right? Gender expression feels like it's where it meets the world, and it
Mm,
feels like it's made manifest physically in the way that we present ourselves. It feels like it's where it's made manifest in the way that we um, relate to other people or relate to the world at large or bring that to the forefront. Where, at least for me, it feels like masculine and
mm,
feminine energies are like an experience of like a felt sense experience versus an image or a behavior.
mm,
If that makes sense.
mhm.
It can lead to a behavior,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
right? But they themselves have always felt separate to me. Well,
Yeah,
not
that
always.
makes sense.
I like went through hell to try to figure that out. But I once I figured that out, I was like, oh, okay, that helps.
And do you identify more with either side?
I've I just always considered myself a woman.
Nice. So you can just, and I mean,
Yeah.
like the polarity wise, do you consider yourself more masculine or feminine, or is it
Very
fluid or
50-50. Yeah, very 50-50.
cool?
And I think that honestly was that was really difficult for me for a long time. I think I
Mm,
really struggled with not feeling more one or the other, but feeling very much both
yeah.
and not knowing what that meant. And I think inside of that for a long time, I felt like neither. And so I can see also where that experience can happen, where I felt so much masculine and so much feminine that I kind of just assumed I wasn't anything because I didn't have a relationship to either. And I was
what's that
struggling
like?
with my relationship to either. Very confusing. I definitely remember being like, I don't know what I am. I don't know what I am because I wasn't yet connected to the way that I could express and that it was all me and that all of it was
cool.
of me. Yeah.
So
I think that was kind of like,
really, I don't know what I am, so I must be nothing, to being like, oh, wait a minute, it's all me. I'm actually everything.
Yeah. And it's all just an expression, and it's all just honestly, like little experiments. And like, did I like that? And did that feel like resonant? Did that feel coherent with me? You know, like, yeah. So I think it really went from, I feel like, both characters in the movie to what the fuck am I? Who am I? Why don't I fit anywhere? What is this? Why does nobody else have this? To, oh shit's coming up now, I gotta look at it. To, I feel so much both that I don't really feel like anything. To let me forge a relationship and let me get to know these parts deeper and deeper, and then being like, oh, I am of all of it.
Amazing.
And so I feel more fluid in general. Yeah.
Like, what was it that allowed you to start building that relationship? Like, I'm imagining somebody hearing this and be like, oh shit, that could potentially be a way out for me. So like, what was the thing that helped you start to build that relationship?
Honestly, I started noticing that certain of my parts did really take on structure from the way that I saw my mother exist and the way that I saw my father exist.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think I use that as an in. My feminine parts, my more feminine parts, and my it's so nuanced, because it's like my feminine expression also feels different than my feminine parts. It's like my feminine expression can come out in some of my masculine parts if they're like feeling really sensitive or whatever. But my feminine parts very much mirror like my mother, right? My masculine parts very much mirror my father.
You just touched on something that is so important that so many people don't get. It's when you look at the Tai Chi symbol, you know, like the yin yang. There's in the black space is a white dot. And then the white space is a black dot. Like there are elements of each within each. And that is an added layer of complexity that a lot of people miss. And to me, like that explains a lot of the differences between gender expression and energies. Is that like, in each of this is the other thing. Like you need both in order for them to understand and relate to each other, at least in some way. So I love that you just pointed to that.
Yeah, I actually love that you brought that to gender expression as well, because that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I noticed that my masculine parts were actually more feminine expressed. And my feminine parts were actually more masculine expressed.
Interesting.
And so it was a little bit confusing for me, but I started to relate to them because my feminine was wreaking havoc in my relationship at the time. And my masculine parts were like not moving in the way that I wanted them to. Right. And so I kind of had to develop a relationship with them because of what was happening circumstantially.
Got it. And are they still expressing themselves in that same kind of, I don't want to say reversed, but like, I guess polarized way? Yeah.
Not as much. No, I've been going through, so I had to really develop a relationship between them. I had to kind of I had to develop a relationship to each of them first. And then I kind of had to develop a relationship between them.
Yes.
And now they're starting to kind of trust each other enough to where my more masculine parts are taking more charge while feeling less shame. And my feminine parts are taking more, feeling more held while feeling less controlling.
That makes perfect sense. Cause like I equate that to the old trope, and I'm going to use gendered shit here, but this is the trope in movies. There's the trope in movies and TV where you have the deadbeat husband and the wife is constantly just nagging at him to do stuff and he's not doing stuff. So she's taking on a more masculine, aggressive role, but from a feminine perspective. And he's taking on a more passive, kind of collapsed role, but in a masculine energy. So they can mirror each other in that way. But just like you said, once they start communicating and that conflict starts to become mediated, then they kind of switch back to what they wanted to be in the first place.
Right. Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
Because that was my experience too. I had the same dynamic and I had to deal with it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because my dad died when I was a little kid. So my masculine side was just collapsed in on itself.
Same.
And so my feminine side had to come over and be like, do all the shit, bro. Like, you're fucking
get it
up.
fucking done. Get it fucking done. Yeah.
And so eventually I had to be like, okay, maybe chill out. You know, like he will take care of you. Like the masculine side will take care of you if you stop being such a bitch about it. Like, let's be cool about this. Get out your rage, get out whatever you got to do. But there's collaboration possible here.
Exactly.
And then after you let them both rage.
Yeah. That honestly took probably like a good year and a half for me to get them even to be in the same room with each other.
Totally.
Because they just fucking hated each other. And, you know, as you're talking, I'm also realizing that, you know, regardless of kind of how anybody identifies or what anybody's internal experience is or their gender expression is, we are also all raised and conditioned by those tropes as well. And so they exist in us regardless, whether or not we recognize them as our parts of us or not. They exist somewhere in us, in our subconscious or in our subconscious understanding of the world, of like what's supposed to be or how it is.
They're cultural archetypes.
Exactly. And so I think that, it's been super helpful for me, honestly, to be able to explore these aspects of myself with the cultural archetypes through the tropes and actually see like, oh, this is what's happening. Like when I'm being a real fucking bitch to myself, I'm like making myself more impotent in ways. Right. And that impotency might take shape in the form of not being able to share my gifts with the world, not being able to like say what I want to say on the internet or whatever it is. And so it takes a lot of different shapes, but it feels, there's like a felt sense of impotency. I want to perform and I can't. Right.
Yeah. And that's what's so interesting about it is like, there's certain elements of it, like regardless of your attraction or expression or whatever it might be, like you have active and passive forces in you.
Yes.
And if the nurturing side of you isn't nurturing the part of you that wants to go out and build things, if instead it's beating it up and bullying it, it's like, regardless of what you want to call those things, if the part of you that can do those things isn't being loved and nurtured and respected and appreciated, it's just not going to do it.
Right.
And likewise, if the other side of you that is meant to make your life more beautiful and nurturing and all that sort of stuff, if it's constantly getting abused, it can't give the gifts that it has to give.
For sure.
And so that's the cool thing about this is I made these assumptions early on in my career that if I looked deep enough, I could find a version of this that was universal to everyone. And I haven't been proven wrong yet. I haven't found a client that this doesn't apply to. You know, I've coached you through it. I'm currently coaching a gay dude through understanding that he's a sub and understanding all that shit. I've coached a trans dude into becoming the man of his house and fatherhood. And I haven't found anybody that this doesn't apply to.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
awesome.
I haven't had any conversations in the queer community in which people don't understand it or have a felt sense experience of it, whether they're connected to it or not.
Yeah. And it is damn near universal. And so I'm also writing this glossary on shadow integration terms,
saw that.
The anima and the animus. And it's like, these are things that we've just accepted for a really long time. And I understand why they get complicated. However, if we're willing to look below the surface, we can find something that it's, as far as I can tell, is pretty much damn near universal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really also important to note that this conversation isn't to take the place of like gender expression or sexuality. It's all connected and it's all supportive of each other, no matter how you identify. It can be connective and supportive. It's not to, at least in my experience, it's not to reconform or reconfigure somebody into something that they don't feel like they fit into. It's it's a tool and a support system.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't give a shit what somebody turns into once they integrate those polarities. Yeah. I don't care. You express yourself anyway, you know, be attracted, do whatever the fuck I don't care. All I care
Yep.
about is that your internal world is harmonious.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
that this polarity conversation is, for me at least, I've found very few things that have brought more peace to my internal world than having my feminine and masculine sides get along and genuinely love each other.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's profound. Yeah. And I would say, to be honest, that the people that I've spoken to about this in the queer community actually understand it better than the people that I've spoken
mm,
to in the straight community. They just haven't known what they were understanding,
oh, sure, you have to
if
explore it
that
from
makes
so
sense.
many more angles than I do.
Right. Right. It's like just growing up, just being a 17-year-old and being attracted to women. I'm like, do I want to be her or do I want her? I don't know. And that's a very different conversation to have. And
Mm-hmm.
I know so many people in the queer community who have experienced some level of, do I want to be them or do I want them? And that in and of itself is part of the conversation. That's part of the polarity conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like if you actually explore it, that's involved.
Yeah. Because I know for certain I've been attracted to women that had qualities that I needed.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
once I integrated those qualities, I wasn't actually attracted to them anymore.
Right.
Because it was just like, oh, I'm looking for pieces of myself in someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I find
Mm-hmm.
that piece of myself, that person's not that attractive anymore.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was that like figuring that out?
Very confusing. Very confusing. I also think I noticed it really created a bond. And I think this is why a lot of people who at least were queer, we didn't even use that word when I was coming out, to be honest. When we were
Mhm.
gay back in the day, it's like so much has kind of changed and transformed. But back when I was um, coming out or recognizing what my sexuality was and that it was like different than the high schoolers that I went to high school with, it was really scary in some ways, but also really fun in some ways, because there was
Mm.
like this little secret society, right? Like I started dating my first girlfriend in high school and we were like, yeah. And there was like a thrill to the fact that behind closed doors, we could just be and do whatever with
Mm.
nobody's eyes on us.
Yeah.
And I think it did create some foundation of like, let's just express however
Mm.
between us. But having that met with society not understanding, I think that's where the tension was created. Because it's like, oh yeah, we've kind of, at least like the experiences that I've had, it's kind of like, let's just figure it out between you and me, not society.
I love that.
But then it's when we come out to society or bring it to society, it's like that's not right, and then that's where it gets confusing.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, otherwise, yeah, I think it was just two tracks to go down. Do I want to be this person? Do I want to be with this person? What is the difference? I don't know. Let's figure it out.
I'm curious, what is the difference? Like, how did you figure that out? Like, what was the moment like where you're like, okay, no, I don't want to be here. It's the other thing.
I think probably, I think one comes with like sexual, physical arousal,
Sure.
and one comes with like soul arousal.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, one comes with like, yeah, I've never been asked that question. That's a great question. One comes with, I would say, like, yeah, like physical curiosity. I want to feel you, touch you, explore you.
Mm.
I want to have that exchange with you.
Yeah.
And one comes like, I want to be near you to almost feel more of that in me.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's
Yeah.
like one allows you to get access to a part of yourself that you didn't have access before. And
Right.
one, it's purely about exploring and connecting with the person.
Yeah, it's like that person. I want to be intimate with you and explore you and like, travel your little ecosystems in your body. And then the other thing is like, even if I watched you from afar, I want more of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, I've never thought of that distinction either. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, it's honestly kind of cool to hear your reflections, and because I've never thought anything else. And
yeah,
so
exactly.
like, oh shit. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's actually fascinating.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like I already asked you this before, but like we've gone so much deeper into the different like relating styles of the internal masculine and feminine. I'm curious, like have your relationships matched your internal experience?
Yeah. So when my feminine parts were running the show, I was very much in relationships where that was like kind of the roles, and also that's what was drawn in, was somebody to like care for me, take care of me,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like make space for all of my expression. And they were a little bit more stoic, and they were more of a
Mm-hmm.
container. And then once my masculine parts really started to want to come to the surface, I had attracted a woman who's very much in her feminine. That's when I freaked out with you. And I noticed, I don't know, I'm not back on the dating scene or anything like that. Like, I'm very much enjoying single life. So I'm not really sure how it's going to go, or what it's going to look like, or how
Got it.
it's going to unfold. But it's definitely a lot more fun.
I love it.
Like,
Yeah,
it's
that's
a
one of the
lot more
biggest
fun.
things I'm
Yeah.
getting from you is this
Yeah.
like fun, enjoyable exploration and play and being like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, but like I'm gonna explore and play and figure it out.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, oh, there's that in me, and there's that in me. And is there a playground where I can see what that's like? Whether that's
Mm-hmm.
like in a sexual dynamic, or a business dynamic, or a friendship dynamic, I get to see different things. I was going through I was like trying to build up my masculine parts a while ago. And I was talking to a couple of my friends in the queer community about this. And for a little while, they were like, every time we go out to dinner, like, you get the bill. Even if we all give you our cards, like, you like have the person bring you the bill, right? Like, be the leader, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just like this fun thing. We got to play with me leading with my energy. Like, I'm taking care of it. I will take care of it. Right.
And the
And
world
so it
responds to you
became,
differently as a result.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's just a playground. It was a playground, and it still is a playground. And it's, now that I've worked through a lot of the emotional turbulence that came along with it, and processed a lot of that stuff, it is a lot more fun,
I
for sure.
fucking love that. That's so
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
awesome. So this has been amazing. This is pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. So thank
Awesome.
you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks for
I
having
guess
me.
the only last question, which is potentially the most sensitive question I've asked, is like, if there is somebody who's listening to this who does have a problem with the polarity and is conflating things, like, is there anything you might want to say to someone in that position?
I would probably say, really curious as to why. Like, I'd be really curious, to be honest.
Mm,
I'm really open to a conversation about it. I'd really love to hear it. And I would probably say, like, I respect that experience. It's not my experience. I have a very different experience. This has honestly been life changing for me, and has made me feel more connected to myself, and honestly less in a box than I ever
mm,
felt like I was in before.
incredible.
But so yeah, I would probably say, like, let's have a convo. Hit me up.
Amazing. Okay, great. So that's perfect. So why don't you tell me like what you're currently working on, where people can hit you up? Because I personally recommend everybody hit you up, get a different perspective on shadow integration, because it's like we're saying the same shit, we're saying it in slightly different ways, but I've never seen you say anything about shadow integration where I'm like, that's wrong. I've
Yeah.
always been like,
Cool.
fuck yeah, she got it. Like, that's
Yeah. Cool.
amazing.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Follow me over on Instagram, Alexandra Cavucci, first and last name. On Facebook, that's kind of where I do my thing.
Amazing.
Or like, hit me up in the DMs and let's have a conversation.
Fuck yeah. Well, Alexander, thank you so much. This was
Thank you for
awesome.
having me, Chris. Yeah. It's really good to
Just
see
great
you.
to see you again and talk to you again.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad you're
For
doing
real.
so well. It's good to feel your heart strong.
Thank
You're
you.
the shit. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. How the fuck do I stop this? I haven't done.